The truth is, a narcissistic woman does not stop torturing you because she feels guilt. She stops only when you no longer feed the illusion of her importance. Her power depends entirely on your emotional reaction. Every time you argue, justify, or seek understanding, you unknowingly sustain her dominance. She doesn't crave love, she craves control, and your emotional energy is her currency. When you withdraw that energy, when you stop explaining yourself, stop defending your intentions, and stop reacting to her provocations, she begins to starve. Silence becomes the mirror she cannot manipulate. Detachment exposes her greatest fear, irrelevance. It's not about revenge or coldness. It's about reclaiming psychological sovereignty. The moment you realize that your attention is the oxygen that fuels her ego, you begin to see the dynamic clearly. It was never about love, it was about power. And power cannot exist without participation. So you must decide when the performance ends. You must be willing to walk away not in anger, but in awareness. Because once you stop feeding her ego, she doesn't just lose control, she loses her stage. And that's when her torment finally ends. A narcissistic woman will keep you trapped as long as you're competing for her validation. She designs the game so that you're always one step away from earning her approval. And that step constantly moves. It's a psychological labyrinth built on scarcity. The more you try to please her, the more she withholds, reinforcing your sense of inadequacy. This is how she keeps you chasing shadows, questioning your worth, and mistaking her manipulation for passion. But the truth is simple. The only way to win this game is not to play. The moment you stop seeking her validation, the illusion collapses. You reclaim the inner authority that she subtly stole through your need to be seen, understood, or loved. What she called love was merely control dressed in affection. And once you refuse to compete for her approval, she faces a reality she cannot bear. One where you exist independently of her narrative. Freedom begins when you recognize that your worth was never hers to grant. The need to be validated by someone who thrives on your insecurity is the very chain that keeps you bound. Break that chain, and you'll realize peace was never outside you, it was what she feared you'd find. A narcissistic woman survives by maintaining illusion. The illusion of superiority, innocence, and control. She crafts a carefully curated identity that hides deep insecurity beneath layers of charm and manipulation. The tragedy is that you begin to believe it. You start to question your own reality, adopting her version of events as truth. But the moment you begin to see through that illusion, when you recognize that her power exists only in perception, everything changes. This awakening is not dramatic, it's quiet, almost unsettling. You begin to notice the subtle contradictions, the shifting narratives, the emotional bait she uses to keep you engaged. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Her words lose their hypnotic pull. Because you've stepped outside the story she wrote for you. Awareness becomes liberation. She loses power not because you fought harder, but because you stopped believing the lie. You no longer play the role she assigned. That is what truly terrifies her. Not your anger, but your clarity. Because when the mask falls, she's left exposed to her own emptiness. And that's when her illusion crumbles. Not with confrontation, but with the quiet strength of truth. A narcissistic woman does not respect boundaries because, to her, limits represent rejection. She sees them not as an act of self-respect, but as a personal insult, a threat to her control. This is why she tests every line you draw, pushing, provoking, and manipulating to see if you will yield. Each time you bend, she learns that your words carry no consequence. But when you finally hold firm, calmly, consistently, and without emotional negotiation, something profound happens. Her usual tactics stop working. The confusion, the guilt trips, the silent treatments lose their power. Boundaries, when rooted in self-worth, are not loud declarations. They are quiet demonstrations of strength. You don't need to argue for them or justify them. You simply live by them. This steadiness unsettles the narcissist because it signals that her emotional influence has expired. You've stopped being a character in her story and started becoming the author of your own. It's not about punishing her. It's about protecting yourself. The moment you realize that peace requires firmness, not permission, everything changes. Because when your boundaries are no longer negotiable, her control no longer exists. And that's when your freedom truly begins. Revenge is the illusion of strength, but healing is its reality. A narcissistic woman thrives on emotional chaos. She needs you to stay entangled in cycles of pain, argument, and resentment. Every reaction reaffirms her significance in your life. That's why the most powerful thing you can do is not to fight her, but to free yourself from the emotional battlefield entirely. Healing is not surrender, it is transcendence. It's the moment you stop needing closure from the person who caused the wound, and instead begin creating peace within yourself. When you choose healing, you shift the power dynamic completely. She no longer controls your emotions because you've stepped beyond the need for her validation or punishment. You start seeing her behavior for what it is, an expression of her own inner emptiness, not a reflection of your worth. That understanding dissolves the grip she once held over your psyche. Healing is not forgetting, it's remembering differently. It's the realization that your scars are not proof of defeat, but of survival. And when you finally stop seeking revenge and start restoring your peace, she doesn't just lose control. She loses her audience. That's when you win in silence. In every painful encounter with a narcissistic woman, there lies an unconscious lesson trying to surface. Carl Jung often said that what we do not make conscious will return to us as fate. The relationship becomes a mirror reflecting the hidden parts of yourself, the unresolved wounds, the unhealed needs, the patterns you've repeated in silence. The torture persists not because she is powerful, but because there is something within you still seeking to be understood. Once that awareness dawns, the cycle begins to lose its hold. You start to see that she was not the teacher of love, but the revealer of illusion. Her cruelty exposes your dependency. Her manipulation exposes your boundaries, and her rejection exposes your self-worth. Every shadow she forced you to confront was guiding you toward your own awakening. When you integrate that lesson, when you stop seeing yourself as the victim and begin to see yourself as the awakened observer, she can no longer touch you. Because, in truth, she stops torturing you the moment you no longer need her to teach you anything. The pain ends where understanding begins. And from that understanding, your freedom finally emerges.